Welcome to Onward Live, a live stream focused on encouraging you to create a life you love living now. Let's go beyond success to significance. Being clear on our why is crucial. It requires doing the inner work, finding ourselves, getting to know ourselves, embracing our inner child, shedding social conditioning, and letting go of perfect. We know obstacles make us stronger. We can dream big and take action. Believe you can, and you're halfway there. I invite you to tune in every week and engage with me and my inspiring guests. Invite your friends. Let's make time for what matters most in our lives. Let's move onward together. Hello. I don't know how many people are going to watch tonight or this afternoon because this is kind of an impromptu Onward Live. And the reason is because on Wednesday night when I went live with Anne, the sound didn't work out too well. I take responsibility for that. I learned a little bit about why that might have happened. So we just decided, hey, look, let's just re-record it. I want the podcast, when I publish it as a podcast on Apple Podcast, Stitcher, Google Play, I want it to sound right. And so does Anne. So that's why we're here again today. And I get to have a second conversation about Anne. We're talking about becoming body joyful. So let me bring her in. Welcome, Anne.
Oh, well, hello, Emily. Thank you for let's do it again and give it a try and see how it goes this time. And it was a great conversation the first time. So I just know it's going to be great this time too.
Yeah, it is. So tell us a little bit about your story. Why are you so interested in becoming body joyful and helping others do the same?
Well, body joyful is a fun word, right? And I think a lot of us don't feel joyful in our bodies. Due to society and due to the way we brought up and due to everything that's around us all the time. And I think that there's a real struggle for young girls too, when it comes to how they look in their bodies. And so my own journey was a lot like that, not liking myself at all. So the subtitle of my book, The Body Joyful, is my journey from self-loathing to self-acceptance and really finding a way to appreciate and like my body and allow myself to do that as well, against the odds of what I have believed in the past.
Well, it's so interesting. I mean, when you were born, you weren't as a little baby, you weren't like, I don't like my body. You were like, look at my fingers. This is so exciting. When you were 2 and 3, you probably, loved your body. What happens to us where we like, we don't like our body anymore? That does so much for us.
I know. And I think it really has to do with our environment, right? And the people that we grow up with, whether it's family or friends or teachers or coaches, and just the words that happen to be spoken around us. And so for me, the very first thing I remember my parents talking about is that I was a chubby little baby. So I was adopted. So they got me when I was 4 months old. And that's how they described me. And that's how to this day they would describe me the same way. Oh, the chubby little Anne. So that was kind of the start of absorbing and taking in that message for me. So,
right. And you may not have been aware that because, now as an adult, you can question that, but as a child, it just comes in and we absorb it and it becomes part of us. So, yeah.
And it just continued to kind of move in that direction for me in my home. So my dad and mom were always weighing themselves on the scale. So I knew that that was important. And my brother, who was adopted as well, looked exactly the opposite of me, right? So tall and thin and freckles and blue eyes and blonde hair. And so, there's this little bit of, I'm just not quite fitting in here to this mold. Yeah. And it was really the nickname. And we talked about that Wednesday night that my brother and his buddies talked about. They started calling me Annie Fanny Farmer And just because of, I think, the implanting
Hmm.
of this knowledge that my body was different, it was bigger than the
Yeah.
other kids in my class, that kind of thing. And I just took that in like fat Fanny. And that I held on to that. And the next thing you know, my whole life was been really, I've had struggle around my body and my body image. And that led to eating issues and exercise issues and a whole
Yeah.
gamut of things.
Well, I mean, we talked about on the last show, kind of thinking of some things we talked about, and I shared, when we talk about eating issues, I shared that around candy, I scarf it down, and I think the reason stems back to my childhood where we weren't allowed to have candy, and at Halloween, I would have my friends take the candy to school and I would chomp down on it there. And so I guess I still, subconsciously feel like I've got to eat it all right now.
Yeah.
So it stems back from my childhood. My daughter can have a box of Good and Plenties and give me two. And I'm like, I want the whole box. And I just want to throw them all down my throat. And it's it's so painful for me to just get two at a time. So yeah, and for you, why don't you share some of your issues you had with eating? Because yours were more dangerous to your body than mine. I mean, I've had some teeth issues, but yeah.
Yeah. The first kind of diet I went on, just due to the fact that I knew I didn't look right. And you start to hear those things in 5th and 6th grade. You start to
Hmm.
hear what's happening around you. I do believe it's worse now. I think there's more talk about it now than there was when I was in those grades 10,
And
11,
social
12.
media.
Exactly. They have it's 24/7 for them now, and it just wasn't like that for us. It
Mm-hmm.
was more magazines. My mom was an avid magazine reader, so she was always had magazines in the house. So there were magazines and things like that. But my first kind of diet, I just slowly stopped eating very much. Everything shrunk down. When I was at school, I barely ate at all. I would eat something in the morning just to appease my parents, and then a little bit move my food around, kind of play with my food at night just to make sure that they saw me eating. And slowly I started to kind of whittle away in front of them and ended up with anorexia nervosa and in the hospital eventually
Mm-hmm.
due to that in the 70s, early before a lot of people knew what that was.
Yeah, you said it was just a few years before Karen Carpenter got sick with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm. And that
So,
was that was the kind of the start of my self-loathing and issues with food plus exercise. That was a combination because that when I was 11 and 12, I remember distinctly doing sit-ups in my room and having to do more the next night if I did so many the first night, that compulsiveness
hmm,
around exercise. So a lot of those kind of behaviors were part of my disease during that time.
yeah, and that's got to be so tough on a parent too,
Mm.
for your parents to go through that and your brother.
Yeah, for sure. And I do write a little bit in the book around that journey
Hmm.
with my brother and my parents. And I do believe because of just the journey that I took writing the book, right? And stepping back from my life and writing a timeline of my body and a timeline of everything, realizing that I really stepped into being a good girl after
Hmm.
I because I knew that I had caused pain and suffering for everybody in the family, and I
Yeah,
didn't
that puts a
want
lot of guilt on you too.
right, and I think that a lot of I know a lot of girls and a lot of women that I've worked with have had this kind of this good girl syndrome, don't wanna get in trouble,
Hmm.
with their parents and
Right.
really make some kinda always not so great decisions trying to be that good girl.
Hmm. Yeah.
So, mm.
And we talked about too on a Wednesday that I want to bring it up again is that um, a lot of times we think body image issues are with people who are overweight.
Mm,
And one of the things I shared was about my daughter and how she was very thin.
I think naturally, and I think from, some of it is maybe some invisible illnesses that she has that contribute to that. But that when she was working at Starbucks, um, people would say to her, "You need to eat a burger."
Mm.
And that really upset her. And then she has some cousins who were picking on her, like, here's a piece of spinach, that Anna's eating or whatever. So whether you're tall, short, thick, thin, whatever, I think we all have these body image issues. And another thing that I wanted to share is when I was a freshman at the Naval Academy, I was 5'11", 140 pounds. And what's in my record is getting prescribed Ensures because I wanted to gain weight and I couldn't gain weight. And I ate so
Wow.
much junk and I couldn't gain weight. I don't have that problem now. I can gain weight easily. But it's like I wasn't happy with my body then. And, perhaps if you were around me at that time, you would have been like, well, what's there to not be happy about? Right.
Exactly, and it really is our own perception, right?
Yeah.
And what we believe to be true about bodies,
Hmm.
and seeing other bodies and having, a real, strong belief around what's kind of quote unquote "a right body" and what is a wrong body, and where does that come from for each person is going to be very individual.
Right.
And you can't, because people would say to me, and I own my privilege for sure, because I am in a smaller body, and I would always say, "Yes, I am." So I don't know certain things that happen on either end of the spectrum.
Right.
And I also know the way that I talk to myself and the way that I look at myself in the mirror was very similar to people of all size bodies, right?
Yeah.
And I think the other side of that, which we didn't touch on Wednesday night, was that we all know people in large bodies who are very healthy
Yep.
and people in small bodies who are very healthy.
Yep.
And the same thing goes with unhealthy.
Hmm.
So, there's a stigma, unfortunately, for either end of the spectrum again, that they're
Right.
not healthy. And how can we take away the body size and shape and look deeper at what's going on and what's the behaviors, how do they behave and how do they eat and how do they move and all the other things that go along with who we are rather than just the number on the scale.
Yeah. I think some of that's changing in terms of in magazines, you see people of all different sizes, shapes, and colors now modeling. And uh, so I think that's awesome. And I think
Yes,
on the runway, they've got not all of them are really, really thin now. I mean, it is changing. People have been speaking out about it and raising awareness about it. So that's definitely good.
that is a
Yeah.
very good thing, and that
Yeah.
that does make me very happy that at
Yeah.
least we're seeing that progression in the
Right.
body positivity, right? And they calling it body positivity and body liberation and then body neutrality, and having a kind of a weaving that there are different landing spots for how you feel in your
Yeah.
body. It doesn't
Yeah.
have to be love or hate.
Right. That's true. So one of the things I think that you cover in your book is about journaling and then also maybe some mirror work. Maybe you want to
Oh,
describe that.
yeah, for sure. I think the mirror work is so hard, and someone has to be ready for that too.
Mm,
There's a work in progress as we move towards mirror work. It's really important to have some appreciation for the body's function first
mhm,
before we step into the mirror and start to look at ourselves in the mirror and start to see ourselves differently. So
mhm,
we have to kind of think about our bodies a little differently first, and then
mhm.
we're able to actually see and perceive our
So
bodies
how
a
do we
little
change the
differently.
way we think about our bodies then? How do we get to that point?
Well, I think it's such a great question, and my first, work is really about what has your body listing down what has your body done for you,
Mhm,
and what are those things that it does today? And a lot of times people can't it does nothing. Like, they don't see it for what it does.
Got it.
And part of the journey with that is really the senses. And we talked about that, like the touch sense and the sight sense, the wonderful sunrises or sunsets that we see, and to hug our children and the touch of a hug and the warmth of a hug. And, some of these things that don't take physicalness, they are just part of who we are. And how can we start to see? I think about our bodies as vehicles,
Yeah.
and these amazing, extraordinary vehicles that do all kinds of things. Once we pause and put the brakes on the negative self-talk and start to become appreciative of
I
the
mean, we don't even
function.
really learn that much about our body. Like, what do the kidneys do, or all the things that we have. And it's like it seems like we only learn about them when we get sick, and
Yes.
something's not working. And then we're like, oh, well, I guess that's a really important part of my body.
Right. And isn't it true that when we get sick, once we start to get better again, we go, wow, I forget how it feels, to feel good, because
Yes.
then we just grab hold of it and are so happy that we're feeling good again.
Yeah. Like when
So,
my back hurts, when your back hurts, or even when you have a paper cut on your thumb,
mhm.
that when you have that paper cut, you really start to realize all the times you use your thumb, right? Or you really start to realize, all the times that your back helps you lift, get in and out of bed, get up and off the toilet, all the things that it helps you do.
It's so true. We don't notice until we can't, until we do notice, because there's something wrong.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of the starting point is starting to really take a different look at our body as a
Yeah.
whole, because it's really, we've gotten narrow focused about
Yeah.
our bodies. We only see the parts we hate
Yeah.
and focus on that, and that just gets bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah. What you focus on is
Hmm.
what your mind goes to. Yeah. So
Yeah.
starting with the journaling and with working with the coach, perhaps to help you see different ways of looking at your body, different perspectives,
Hmm.
and a coach might, in a good way, challenge, well, what else could be true,
Yes,
and help you see
absolutely.
things that you wouldn't normally see on your own. And
Yes,
that's
for
what you do,
sure.
right? Because you're
Hmm.
I don't think I have it on it, but I got your website. You are a You're a certified intuitive eating counselor, a body confidence coach, an eating disorder specialist, and an author. We talked
Hmm.
about your book, but these are all things that you coach people on.
My own journey took me back to school to learn a different way, because I was in fitness for 30 years. My journey with my body didn't end at the end of my anorexia nervosa when I
Mm,
was, 15. It stayed with me. It wasn't an eating disorder per se for much of my life, but the disordered thinking, body dysmorphia, and the obsessiveness around exercise and food and eating
mhm,
took a run for the money. I would binge and purge, exercise purging in periods of time, usually in periods of time of stress,
mhm.
right? So
Yeah.
when stress was high, I went through a divorce, and when stress was high, boy, was I right back into um, eating disorder behavior.
Yeah.
And
So paying attention to our thoughts and
mm,
our feelings about our situations. And we talked about the other night when the mic wasn't working, and, I started sweating, you started sweating, we're live on, and, for somebody, you might be starting to feel like I got to go eat something, and eating
mhm,
something's not going to really make that anxiety go away. But, for somebody else, it might be, I got to go drink something. For me, my addiction, and I didn't really realize it was kind of an addiction, is busyness. So I
mm,
stay really busy as a way to avoid my feelings. And so we all have something that we kind of cling to.
right.
And being aware of it is the first step to healing and to making some healthy changes in our lives.
Yeah, and what does that for you? What triggers you towards those
Hmm.
things and becoming aware of the emotions that we never really learned how to manage our emotions.
No,
We
we
were
didn't even
just
know how to name them.
right.
It's like, Well, first off, it's like go to timeout or you get and think about what you did. So you
Yep.
beat yourself up in timeout, right?
Yep.
And
Yep.
then I think it was Brene Brown did an interview with someone who wrote a book called Permission to Feel. I mean, that's one of the reasons I retired. I wanted to work on myself. I knew that I didn't even know how to name my feelings. Happy and sad. That's about it. And I started working with a coach, and she'd ask, well, what do you feel about that? I'm like, nothing. I don't know. I know what I think.
Right.
But we've
Right.
got to, what we think causes how we feel. And like one of my guests, I feel like I say this a lot on my show. One of my previous guests said, when you shove your feelings down to the basement, they lift weights.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to come out. And I shoved mine all down when I was busy working, being a single parent. And they all came out when my children's father passed away 3 years ago. And I learned how to feel them all and not ignore them, not shove them down. It's hard to sit there in the moment and feel it, but that's how you heal.
It's so true. And it is hard. And to acknowledge that it's hard, and to acknowledge my mother's favorite saying, this too shall pass, and to really understand that our emotions, good or bad, hard or easy, they all will come and go.
Yeah.
And, the ones that we don't like, those are the ones that we don't want to feel. And that's why we have that go to, whatever that might be. And that might change over time
Yeah.
too, right? As
Right.
we continue to not feel our feelings.
Yeah.
And so part of the work that we need to do is to feel and learn how to feel and be okay with feeling and
Right.
naming emotions, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Practice naming them. I have a sheet with all the different names of different emotions. So sometimes if I don't even know, but I'll look at that sheet. But I've been reading, I read this book called Untethered Soul, and then there's another book called Living Untethered. And those are really good books. It's all about how that energy of those feelings stays in our body if we don't let it out. And Michael Singer, I think, is the author, and he was just being interviewed on a podcast, and apparently he's not very often, but it was cool because it was right around the time that the shooting in Texas had happened with the kids. And so it's like, how do you feel those feelings and then let them go? Doesn't that cause guilt for letting them go? I mean, but he said you can feel them and you can feel sad, but if you kind of wallow in it, or if you, I'm not going to explain it exactly how he did, but if you just let those feelings stay stuck in you, then that's stuck energy, and it's not doing the situation any good. You're not in any place to go take action to, on what your position is on gun control or whatever. You're not in any place to do that. You're just sitting there depressed. So how do you let those feelings, feel them, name them, let them flow through you, but not get stuck in your body?
Right. And I do think that, like for me, a lot of times, and it does have to do with like leaving the kids when they get older, and you're leaving. You've been with them for a little while and you're leaving. And I will hurt. My heart will hurt. Right. And so I actually talk to myself. It's okay. Your heart can hurt. And I'm crying and my heart hurts.
I
And
know.
and that's okay. But it's that allowing for the feels, right? Allowing for the feels. One of the phrase that I heard, which I thought was so great, is that pain is inevitable, suffering is optional.
Yeah.
Right. And we can, and it's okay to sit in suffering for a little while. And it's okay to say, okay, I can come out of that now. Right.
Yeah.
It's all in that awareness, and it's hard and it's not easy, and you have to have patience and learn it, and sometimes having somebody sit with you through those hard feelings can be very helpful,
Yeah.
to validate and be there with you.
Right. And I had a guest on my show. We were talking about yoga, and he talked about how yoga can help you with overeating. He said, because really what it is it's mindfulness, right? We can go to the refrigerator, open the refrigerator. I can do this, eat a whole half gallon of ice cream without even realizing it. But if we've practiced mindfulness, if we've trained our brain to be in the present moment and to notice, one of my coaches says, notice what you're noticing.
Mhm.
All right. I'm
Right.
noticing that I'm going to the refrigerator to get this ice cream out at 2 in the afternoon or at 2 in the morning, right?
Mhm.
What are my thoughts and what am I really feeling? And taking that break. And that's with yoga or mindfulness practice, like in the area where I coach positive intelligence, mental fitness coaching, you can create new neural pathways in your brain to enable you to just not automatically react and go get that food and to really think and be. And if you decide consciously, I'm having this ice cream, then have it, right? It's
Right.
not about
Right.
depriving yourself, right?
Exactly. And then not feel guilty after having
Right.
it because it was a conscious decision.
It's a conscious decision.
Yes. I agree 100% with that, and thinking about how easy it is to have some of those thoughts automatic, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's they've worn the path so worn down that
Mm-hmm.
they're almost unconscious thoughts,
Yes.
right? And it
Mm-hmm.
becomes the truth, and that's who I am, and this is what I always do, and I'll never be able to not be able to no, I'll never be able to not be able to do it, if that made sense. But
Yeah.
that's how strong they get. And to know that you can pause and slow them down and take some deep breaths and become more grounded and know that you're taking 6 steps to get the ice cream out with a spoon in your hand before you
Mm-hmm.
even, put it in your mouth. That there are, I call them chain links, right? And how can we break one of the chain links? It can be any one of them with that pause. And just by
Yes.
pausing long enough, that's where you can take that breath and make a conscious decision.
Maybe drink some water or call a friend or a journal. I don't know. But yeah,
Mhm.
it's not easy. Like, I
Mm-mm.
mean, some people might look at me and say, well, you're thin. You don't have these problems. Okay. Well, one day my nephew posted frosted mini wheats on Facebook, and I happened to live in an apartment in DC above Harris Teeter. My mouth started watering. That's my favorite cereal. My mouth started watering. I got dressed. I went downstairs. I walked around to the grocery store. I had to get milk and the cereal. And the
Yeah.
whole time, I finally just made a conscious decision. Yes, I'm getting this. But I mean, it was really, I could just feel the addiction to the sugar, actually.
Yeah. Yeah. So interesting, right? And then there's that. I think it's you made a conscious decision to have it,
I
right?
did.
And then there's what else goes with that, and to be okay with the fact that, all right, if you didn't do it, how long would you continue to be thinking about it? I
Yeah.
don't think we always realize sometimes the best thing, if you've been thinking about the same food for 3 days, how much energy and time is being taken up by that thought
That
process,
thought
right? What
process.
other
Yeah.
things can you be doing with your thoughts and your
Right.
time?
And this
So,
was like 4 years ago. It was before I had done some work on myself. So probably didn't, there's some feelings underlying there that I couldn't even name. I was not prepared to even go there. So I've come a
mhm,
long way, but that's just an
yeah,
example of that. And then, you said that you can change. I used to think I'm busy all the time and it's because of my job. Well, when I
mm,
retired and I didn't have a quote unquote job, I was my own boss. I was busier than ever. So I realized, oh, I have nowhere else to point but me.
mm,
And so, busyness, like I said, was my way of avoiding my feelings. And you can change. If I could change from being busy to being more calm and relaxed and in the moment, not perfect at it, I would say anyone can because I have a really strong hyperachiever, restless, always on the go saboteur in my brain. And that's kind of how my mom was. That's how I was conditioned when I was growing up. It was like, do something. Got to
mm,
be doing
yeah,
something.
yeah. You might have gotten trouble for sitting
Just
down,
sitting,
not doing
wasting
anything.
time.
Right, exactly. What are
She
you
didn't mean
doing?
anything bad by it, but that's just what I
No.
picked up. You got to be productive.
Yes, yes.
Hmm.
And it's so interesting because that's exactly what we were talking about, is these are our beliefs, that
Right.
this is who I am. I
And
am
they're so
productive.
strong, we don't even think that we could challenge those beliefs. We can
Yes.
see it in other people,
Mhm. Yes.
but it's very hard to see it in ourselves.
Yeah. And can you and are you willing, right? Are you willing to question yourself
Hmm.
around some of these behaviors? Because they do feel more comfortable. They are familiar. they work for you until they
Yeah.
don't work anymore.
What are some aha moments that you've seen your clients experience?
Oh, just the aha of being able to make a rational decision in that space. We talk about one of my favorite quotes is Viktor Frankl's "Between stimulus and response is a space."
Mhm.
And
Hmm.
in that space is where we can actually make different choices and decisions and stuff. And how do we just continue to widen that space? So
Mhm.
to have somebody tell me, "Oh my gosh, I was actually in the freezer looking," and all of a sudden I'm like, what am I doing? And how that is like a revelation that,
Yeah.
am I hungry? Do I want this? Or is this what do I even feel? What's happening? And so she shut it and she just stepped outside and started to just have that conversation with herself. What's going on? What am I feeling? What
Mhm.
do I need in this moment? Right.
Mm.
And then we can reverse engineer what was happening in the moment that action just started. And that's great aha awareness that
Oh, for
happens,
sure.
right?
Yeah.
And then another one which I think is really fascinating is a response to a daughter, right, where
Mhm.
she didn't respond the way she normally would respond to her daughter around something. And our next session, she just said, "I just noticed myself look and breathe and nod my head and then just turn and walk away because it wasn't mine to jump into."
Yeah.
And how your own mindfulness can really impact your family. It's not just you, it's those around you, right?
Yeah. Sometimes we think it's been challenging for me to let my grown kids go, right? I'm a single parent. Their dad passed away. I mean, but they're 29 and 26. And sometimes I still take some of their challenges on
Mm,
when I don't need to. And so I wasn't always aware of it. I had a coach help me like with some specific examples of, oh yeah, I guess that's another way of looking at it. It's not mine to
mhm.
take on. It's not my story. It's not my life.
Right, right. And I did see your interview with your son and how wonderful. My heart was so warm, but how wonderful that conversation was and how you both are learning from each other at this point. And see, I
Yeah,
get teary. I get really
me
emotional
too.
because that was
Yes.
it's so great when you can change yourself. And I think about this with my daughters. I was not a good role model around
Mm-hmm.
food or
Mm-hmm.
weight or body, and now we can have these amazing conversations around body image, and they have a whole different outlook on their bodies and who they are. And I see their confidence
That's
and I
awesome.
see themselves feeling, this is my body and these are the things it can do, and not getting caught up in all of the other are they perfect? No. They have their anxiety with things and certain, but the body piece is not usually one of them. It's something else that kind of trips that up. So,
Mm-hmm.
and I do think it's because of the fact that we've been able to talk about it.
That's
And
awesome.
and I've been able to own, I was like, yeah, those aren't good behaviors.
Yeah.
Right.
And so then I
So,
don't know if they have kids, but then ideally it won't get passed on to their children, right?
right.
You're stopping the chain.
Yes. And isn't that's really, I think, when I think about my mission with all of this, is really to start to change the conversation around weight and food and bodies so that we can break this chain a little bit. I think we mentioned last time that the eating disorder rate has increased tremendously, the
Yeah.
last couple of years since the pandemic, and how that's concerning for children because that's where the increase is happening between 8, believe it or not,
Wow.
and 16. And so we just, how can we really start to change how they're seeing themselves at 8, 9, 10, and changing that conversation and the way that they can see themselves. So, um,
How can we do that? I mean, how do you do it? You do it through your clients. Are there other ways that you do it as well?
I talk about it a lot. So,
Hmm.
and this is one of the things that I think is in the show notes is the Body Joyful Revolution, which is a free Facebook community. It's a private
Mm-hmm.
Facebook community, 18 and older. And it's really a place where we're changing the conversation around bodies in hopes to have role models for our next generations to come that are seeing themselves different, who can look in the mirror and say that they're beautiful or that their body is so strong, and that look at my arms, they can do this, and look at my legs, that they can do this. And, that it's okay to have a belly, and this is
Right.
what it does. And these are the things that it works for. Right. And to allow some of the, looking at themselves differently, because kids, we know they'll look and they see everything. They
I
see
know.
when we look in the mirror, right? They see when we're
Yeah.
pulling at our clothes, or saying no to certain foods and saying this is bad, I can't eat that, or whatnot. They take that all in, and
They do.
so
So, I mean, I know that your target audience is women, but do men have some body image issues as well, or is it mostly women?
oh, for sure, and I think even more so now. It was not it was not okay to come out as having an eating disorder as a male
Mm-hmm.
years ago.
Mm-hmm.
It is now more accessible to get help, or they're able to get help. So I think it can run the gamut along, sexes and sex orientation and all those things. I think
Yeah.
it's it's across the board. So that's part of what is our mission, to try to
Right.
make sure that we know that it can happen to anyone. So it's not just and it used to be thought of, when I had my disorder in the 70s, it used to be thought of as, quote unquote, a white girl's disease. And it was, and that middle class white girl, and that was what it was thought of as, because those are the people that were, able to afford help, or were the ones that were kind of coming out for help. And now we just know that it doesn't discriminate.
Doesn't discriminate. No.
Eating disorders don't discriminate, and I think that's important for people to know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So a
So,
Facebook user, I can't tell who it is. I'm wondering if
oh,
it's Kelly Ballantyne, but I don't know. A lot of times it
okay.
is. But she says, or he, hi, Emily and Ann. Hello. This is kind of an impromptu interview because the last one we did, the sound didn't work out too well. So we decided to just do it again on Friday afternoon. So
Why not?
why not? Thank you for joining
Yeah.
us.
Yeah.
So, Ann, you have an Instagram. I'm going to put it up here, and you go on there quite a bit with just some short videos, encouraging your followers about like everyday life things. What are some of the things that you talk about there?
Well, one of the things, hi Jenny. It's
Oh,
Jenny.
it's Jenny. Hi, Jenny. Jenny Gold. Hi,
Yeah.
Jenny.
One of the things that I just spoke about was this willingness, because a lot of times we say, I want to do this, and I want to do that. And when I do this, then I'll do that. Right. I call that the when I, then I game. But are you willing to do some of the work that it takes to get whatever that is that you want? And that's a different way of saying it. You hear it differently.
Yeah.
I am willing, right, to go outside and take a walk. Oh, I want to take a walk. Oh, it's too hot. And then,
Mm-hmm.
excuses can come up, and that's okay. But also, are you willing to do the things that you want to do?
It's a
So
mindset thing.
it
Yeah.
is for sure. And I do talk a lot about mindset and emotions, and feeling your emotions. That your thoughts are not you, and
Mm-hmm.
that we can pause and we can change a thought. We can actually change a thought. And I think so many people and I think as children, we thought our thoughts were real.
Yes. Yeah, we
That's
did. Yeah.
that's how
And I
it
think
connects,
sometimes we say,
right?
I need to go work out. That need has a
Mm,
different level of energy than I am going to work out or I want to work out. So our words
hmm
matter, right?
Yes. And the way our brain interprets our words,
Mm-hmm.
right? For sure. Need and should. Those are great, pause, or pausing words to
Yes.
say, why am I saying I need to do this? What
Yes.
is the need,
Yeah.
or
One of the
what
things
is the
that I do in my
should?
Yeah, in my coaching program is make a list of all your shoulds, and are they really shoulds, or and all your needs, are they really needs, or are they
Mm-hmm.
wants? And
Right.
just changing our language, changing our thoughts about things,
Mm.
can really help us put our lives into perspective and make better decisions that will help us achieve our goals.
Yes, and a lot of the clients that I work with too do the exact same thing. They go, "Yeah, I really need to wait. I really I'd really like to do," they catch themselves
Yes.
in the moment, and
That's a good thing to be able to
it's
catch yourself. It means you are noticing what you're noticing. That's a big step,
it's a
right?
huge step,
Mm-hmm.
it's there's a huge success in awareness,
Mm-hmm.
just becoming aware of something, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because we can't change anything unless we're aware there's something that we want to change,
Right.
right? And so,
Right.
and it gets, I think that I call our thoughts sometimes like a spider web, because one thought gets connected to another, connected to another, connected to another. This magnetic, and all of a sudden you have 100 little thoughts going on in your head, and wherever they're going, they're spiraling up or they're spiraling down. And that's, how can we slow them down and pause and take a break and try something else?
Yes.
Try, yeah,
For
right.
sure.
So,
For sure.
mhm,
So you've written this book, and I know that I'll put it in the show notes. You said that people can email you and just put book in the subject line and you'll
mhm,
send them the book.
for
Tell us a
sure.
little bit about what they'll find in the book.
Well, the book is really kind of half a memoir and half a self-help. So it really outlines my story as to how I got kind of caught in this trap of self-loathing and body loathing. And I also, at the end of most chapters, I have what I call step backs. So we can step back and you can step into the story and see
Mm-hmm.
what kind of things may have been similar that you can look back on that may have formed some of the beliefs that you have. I have a cousin who's about 20 years older, and she said it's very similar to aging. Some of the step backs that she was able to see a similarity. She didn't have any of the body issues or anything, but she could
Okay.
see that with the aging, and
Mm-hmm.
how you could still get some really good information around, the step backs by working through some of those. So it's really kind of my journey through um, getting stuck in this self-loathing treadmill, and I use the gardening analogy with seeds, where we get these beliefs planted, and then they get kind of rooted and solidified in there, and it takes some noticing and weeding before
Yeah.
we can replant and start to flourish. And so that's kind of the way the book rolls out, and share a lot of the things that I did to help myself out, and then, give the reader the opportunity to yeah, experiment with some things that might work for them too.
That's awesome
So,
because when you share your story, then it helps other people realize they're not alone. Oh, she went through that and she
mm,
came out the other side. I can do it too. And
yeah,
I like that it applies to all areas of your life, not just body image issues. So,
yeah.
why did you decide to write it? Was it healing? Did it heal you by writing it?
I found out so much more by writing it, right? It started out with just kind of a memoir piece, and then just really understanding, well, it's no wonder I started down this path. And once you can start to validate yourself for some of
Mm-hmm.
your choices and decisions that you've been beating yourself up over for years,
Yeah.
it really lightens the load a little bit, and then you're
Mm-hmm.
able to feel, I don't know if it's easier, but it just gives you you're allowed to feel, and it's
Mm-hmm.
okay to feel. And I use that term a lot with a lot of our behavior. Well, it's no
Mm-hmm.
wonder that that's what you did, because look at what's been going on,
Right.
this, and this, and how can it was uncomfortable.
A lot
It
of
was
times that kind of
unfamiliar.
feeling and thoughts haven't been validated for us, though, so we continue to beat ourselves up for it. And then, like, you're right, when you take a step back and you realize, well, wouldn't anyone feel or think that way after having
Right.
been through what I went through or whatever?
Yeah.
And then you can give yourself some grace, some
Yes.
compassion.
Mhm. I say sometimes, and it's happened to be a little bit more lately too, that sometimes the only person that will validate you is yourself, and
Mm,
that you can validate yourself. It's okay. because we want validation from our friends or from our family or for someone, and um, they might not just they might not get it,
Yeah,
and
that's so true.
that's not their job to get it.
Right.
A lot of them will, but not always. And so sometimes, you can validate yourself for what you're feeling, because your feelings are your feelings. No one can take them away from you. So have them, identify them, and then what are you going to do with them? How does that work?
So how,
So
like when you wrote in the book, I'm assuming you might have written about how your parents said she's the chubby baby, or maybe how your brother said, um, what did he say?
Fanny Farmer.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So did you write about those things, and how did you deal with how they might have reacted to it?
Well, my brother, I really tried. I didn't. I really tried not to blame anybody, because it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't anybody's fault. It
Mm-hmm.
was my own interpretation. It was my own
Mm-hmm.
internalization of what was
Mm-hmm.
happening around me, and so I was very specific about that.
Mm-hmm.
And why wouldn't he and his buddies? He
Say
wouldn't want
that.
his little pesty little sister around playing football with the boys,
Yeah.
so and his army men, and I mean, I did all kinds of little
Right.
things that annoying sisters do, right?
Yeah.
So I tried to make sure that I wasn't blaming at all,
Mm-hmm.
but I also wanted to lay out kind of the things that happened that I did take in, and there were specific events that I do lay out in the book that really were internalized. I internalized them. No one
Mm-hmm.
else did. I did. Um, and and then that's when I could step back and go, no wonder. I
Yeah.
thought, because I took it all in. And it's that, and I'm sure you've talked about this with a guest, how once we put something in our brain, we look for proof to
Yes.
make sure it's true.
Right.
And so that's what I was doing. I was just, oh, well, then I must be fat. Oh, well, then I must be fat. Oh, well, then I must be like, I just was looking for proof all around me at that age. And I found it, because if you look for it, you're going to
You will
find
find
it.
it. And we need to
Yeah.
stop and ask, well, is that true? What else
Mm,
could be true? One of my past guests said that, our mind thinks all these thoughts, and, 70,000 a day or whatever. And we just rubber stamp them and say, yep, that's it. That's true. That's true. We never really stop and say, well, is that true? So
right.
that's taking a pause, being
Mm,
mindful.
yeah. The curiosity, being curious with your thoughts, and compassionate with your thoughts, and allowing them to kind of show up and say, can I question that?
Yeah. Because
Is
your
that
thoughts
true?
aren't you,
Exactly.
you're the observer of your thoughts.
Mhm. Right. And that's hard. That's hard to grasp.
Yeah, it is very hard
So,
to grasp.
yeah. And that's, I think, people will call it the inner mean girl, right? Or your
Hmm.
inner critic or whatnot. And I have names for the people in my head, and the neighborhood in my head, and all the different names that I would call them. And that really helped me notice when they were acting up, and when it
Yeah.
was not, it was a thought that was just been around forever, and that
Right.
I could actually take a look at it from a different set of eyes, from a different perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So, yeah. Yeah.
Well, I'm trying to think if there's something that we talked about on Wednesday night when the audio didn't work that we didn't discuss tonight. I think we covered a lot of it and more.
I do too. I think so
Hmm.
too. So it was, when we had our conversation too, it was really interesting how we both started, and how the emotions will kick in during little triggers.
Yeah.
Something happens, and all of a sudden that voice comes in, and we both were like, what's going
Yeah.
on?
The sound's
What's
not working.
happening?
What's going on? We're sweating. We're getting, and you said in that part of it, you said you start to feel small, like people are watching us, the eyes on us, and it's not working out. And then I said, look, that kind of thing would have really gotten me stressed in the past. But
Mhm.
when I think it was just seeing my kid's dad pass away, I look at things differently now, because it's like, look, when I'm at the end of my life, am I going to be thinking about, oh my gosh, that interview I did with Anne and the sound didn't work? No.
Right.
And so
Right.
we were just showing that we're human, right?
Right, right. And one thing that you had shared, which I'd love to bring up,
Hmm.
was when our posture, right?
Yeah.
When we start to feel more confident or comfortable in our bodies or ourselves or our minds, whatever that might be, we sit up taller or we stand up taller and we bring our chest out, and just that action shifts our energy, and
Yeah, for sure.
it pulls confidence in
Yeah.
us
And I
versus
remember when we were talking about that, because it was when I was asking you, I was telling you I wasn't so sure if I'd have a boob job or not because I
right.
feel like they're big. And when I look in the mirror, I don't see that, but when I see pictures of myself, I don't like it. And so should I or shouldn't I? And we talked about the fact that you as a coach aren't going to tell me what I should or shouldn't do. It's up to the client to figure out what works for me and to really look into what are the reasons, why am I thinking that, and am I thinking that having that breast reduction is gonna all of a sudden make me so much, am I looking for that to make me happier?
Right.
So some thought process that goes into whether or not we do that. And that's when we started talking about, like, you could be self-conscious about your chest and then you slouch
Right.
or whatever, and how posture really helps with your confidence.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I think I use this example, like if you're walking down the street and you don't feel good about yourself, you're kind of hunched over, you're looking down, and if you see anybody looking at you, you know exactly what they're thinking.
Oh
Oh, they
yeah, you
must be
do.
thinking this, and oh, they must be thinking that, right? Um, and then if something happens and you're walking down the street and you feel good, you're tall and you're lifted, you don't notice anybody walking by, you don't notice, you might say hi, but you don't go into that
Story.
assuming that this person's saying that and that person's saying that. And
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
know that because that's in my head. It's not in their heads, but
Right. How do
that's
you know? Wait a second. How do I know that's what they were thinking when they looked at me? They could have been stressed out about something and probably didn't even notice me. Right. I
Yep,
mean,
yep, yep, for sure. And that's so interesting though. I always, that's a
yeah.
really important thing to bring up too,
Yeah, it
is when
is.
when you're thinking that everybody's thinking this about you.
Yeah.
It
One
comes
thought can
from,
lead to a whole
oh,
story. You
oh
could write a
yeah.
whole book on a thought that's not even true, right? If you let it go
Exactly.
that far.
Exactly. Yep, it's so true. And I one of the mentors I didn't work with, but read her book, and that's Byron Katie, right? And
Hmm.
her work, and is that true? And what if that's true? And then how do you feel if that's true? And all those questions,
Right.
so there's a lot of kind of the tips and tools that I found just from doing my own work helped me tremendously in my own understanding of feelings and
Yeah.
thoughts and emotions and stories and
Yeah.
identities and all of those things that we hold on to.
That's one thing about becoming a coach. Y- When you become a coach, when you go to the coach training, like you've done and I've done, it's not to fix others. It's not to, you don't even really focus a lot initially on coaching. You focus on yourself,
Mhm,
right? And
mhm.
you learn a lot about yourself. And then that enables you to be a better coach. So when you become a coach, you learn so much about yourself that just enables you to be such a good coach, I think. So
Mhm,
I can tell
yeah.
you're a good coach, Anne. Hmm.
And we are learning all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm always learning, and everybody helps me learn.
Yes.
Whether it's a client or my coach, but I'm always kind of understanding and seeing different perspectives and learning new things.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what it's all about.
Yep.
You don't go
Yep.
to a coach really to get fixed.
Nope.
I don't think,
Nope.
but you can work on certain things that are going on,
Right.
right? And
Right. Yeah.
but yeah,
Yeah. You
there's
don't go to
no
get fixed. Yeah.
yeah. I go, we're trying to kind of work ourselves out of a job, I guess, but that's
Yeah.
it's because we want people to be able to handle the things that we feel blessed to be able to handle now,
Yeah.
because I do. And
And I still work with coaches, and I'm sure you do too. So
yep.
if you're investing in a coach, invest in a coach that's investing in themselves. It's always learning.
Yes,
Yeah.
for sure. Absolutely. And
So,
that's one of those wonderful things that you can always find,
right.
a mentor and someone to learn from.
Yep.
So, yeah.
So I want to put your email address in the show notes so people can
Mhm.
email you with a subject line book, and
Mhm.
then they can get a copy of your book. Your book is The Body Joyful: My Journey from Self-Loathing to Self-Acceptance. And we're going to talk
Mhm.
about that in just a minute, the title. And
Mhm.
then your Instagram is Anne Poirier at with 11
Mhm.
behind it.
Mhm.
And then you have a website, which
Mhm.
is thebodyjoyful.com.
Mhm.
So when with the title of the book, I remember the last time we talked, you said that your publisher wanted you to have the title be My Journey from Self-Loathing to Self-Love, and you said no, it's got to be self-acceptance. And can you explain that and why?
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing is that when I worked on myself in this place of self-loathing and really not liking myself at all, self-love was like I had aversion to the word itself and body love. Like there's no way. It was inconceivable that I would ever get to a space where I can love my body. And for a lot of people, that's where they are. And it's just too much of a jump to go from where they are to this place of love.
Mm-hmm.
Self-acceptance and body acceptance it's closer.
Yeah.
It's still a reach. And that's why there are stepping stones along the way. And a body of appreciation and self-appreciation is part of that journey and working through some of those tools that we can work through to help along that journey towards self-acceptance. But that I really didn't want to turn people off, especially
Yeah.
the people that I work with, to say from self-loathing to self-love, because I thought, well, if they were in my place of self-loathing, they're going to be like, nah, I don't need that. That's not going to work for me. Right. And so I really wanted acceptance. That was the word that mattered to me.
Yep. And then I
Yeah.
said your next book is going to be From Self-Acceptance to Self-Love.
Right. Right. Then that's more doable. It's more
Right.
reachable. Right.
Right.
So yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
And thank
Yeah.
you so much for being on the Onward podcast for a second time.
Thank you so much for having me, Emily. I love what you're doing, and you're doing amazing work sharing stories about people and the information that you give to. So it's been a pleasure.
Thank
Happy to
you.
do it a second time.
Okay.
Mhm, mhm.
I'll put you in the green room and I'll be right back. Thank you, everybody, for watching the show. I greatly appreciate you. Jenny, I saw you were there. There might have been a couple other people watching, and I appreciate you. And I hope everyone has a wonderful 4th of July weekend. And I'm just going to play the outro, and I'll see you guys next week.
Onward Live is sponsored by Emily Harmon Coaching and Consulting. Visit my website, emilyharmon.com, to learn more about me and my coaching programs. I'd love to help you create a life you love living. Remember, every adversity is our own personal university. Sometimes the lessons are difficult, and we must learn from our experiences. Vulnerability is your superpower. You are lovable and worthy. And we discuss these topics and more because professional is personal. Thank you for joining us. And